Welcome to Life L'Chaim. On today's episode, host Lee Lazerson talks with Author Ann Wainer, author of the new book, The Jewish and Brazilian Connection to New York, India, and Ecology. And Lee talks with Jewish Journal reporter Randall Lieberman. We'll be right back after these messages.
Joining us today on To Life L'Chaim is Ann Wainer. Ann, I know you're an environmental lawyer practicing in Brazil, but you come to us today, as you have in the past. You have a new book. It's called Jewish and Brazilian Connections to New York, India, and the Ecology, which is a collection of essays that you've wrote. Ann, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lee. It's always a pleasure to return to L'Chaim program. Thank
Very
you
good.
for having me again.
The first essay in your book is very intriguing because it talks about the first Jewish settlements to New Amsterdam, which of course is now New York, but dating back to the early 17th century. What compelled you to write that essay?
Exactly. This essay dates back to 1654, middle of 17th century. And interestingly enough, now in 2014, we are celebrating 360 years of Jewish life in America. What compelled me to write this book? That's such an interesting question. Many years ago, more than 2 decades ago in Brazil, I wrote a book about Brazilian environmental law. And I noticed that in the 17th century, the Dutch that occupied the northeast of Brazil, specifically Recife, which is the capital of Pernambuco, a state in the, again, as I mentioned, in the northeast of Brazil, they had very interesting and very pioneer and modern environmental laws. And for some reason, when I was looking and researching those laws, I found out that they were Dutch Jews. But at that time, I couldn't explore in that book because the book was just dealing about the history of law. So then I left to another topic, another book, the real history of the Jewish occupation in Brazil in the 17th century. So that's how my interest started in this topic.
Now, were the Jews, were the Dutch Jews, were they a prominent people at that time in the early 17th century?
They were. First, they came from Amsterdam, and they were looking for new opportunities in the new world. So the Dutch always tolerated the practice of Jewish religion, unlike the Portuguese. So in Brazil, in Pernambuco, they felt very comfortable. They were able to build 2 synagogues. One of them was 10 years ago, recently renovated. And they built mikvahs and schools and charitable institutions. They were really very organized. It's one of the synagogues is called Kahal Sur Israel, and as you might know, Kahal Sur Israel means Congregation of the Rock of Israel. And I think it's very interesting because Recife actually means reef, a strong and solid rock.
Right.
So everything is very connected. Yes, they had a very good life in Recife.
But at first they weren't going to be allowed to come to New York, as I understand it. They had to get special permissions from the Dutch East India Company to come to New York, and then that was finally granted. And that was, 23 individuals that came over and settled in New Amsterdam?
Exactly, because what happened, and that's very accurate, it's exactly 23. What happened was that when the Portuguese recaptured Recife from the Dutch, and they expelled the Dutch Jews had 23, the Dutch Brazilian Jews actually, had 3 months to convert themselves or to leave. So some of them went to Amsterdam, some of them went to the Caribbean, and some of 23, the lucky ones,
Right.
went to New Amsterdam, now known as New York, and founded this wonderful, one of the most influential and modern Jewish communities of the world.
Right. Take us through some of the challenges that they faced when they first arrived.
Well, first of all, if we take a step back, we need to understand that they faced, adversities from the Portuguese that expelled them again from Recife, from Brazil. Then they
So they first came from Amsterdam.
Yes.
And then they went to Brazil first, and then
That's
they
right.
they were told to get out of Brazil.
Exactly.
And then came to Amsterdam.
Yes,
New
but
Amsterdam.
yes, they came to New Amsterdam. But Lee, what happened was that on their way to New Amsterdam, they faced pirates in the Caribbean, poverty, and several other odds. And they had almost no monies because the Portuguese had taken all the money they had in Brazil. They couldn't take everything on the ship. They changed ships actually a couple of times. So when they arrived there, well, 17 different languages were spoken. Then the New Amsterdam was habitated by smugglers, thieves, so they were very well-educated people. And almost at their arrival, they faced the obstacle of Peter Stuyvesant, the Lord Governor of New Amsterdam. And he...
Who was like the first anti-Semite of the New America.
Yes, and who would say that? Because, the other day, even in an event, someone told me, oh, I studied in this Peter Stuyvesant High School and I have good memories. I didn't know,
Right.
his background. But anyhow, that's correct. He didn't want these Jews because he felt that it was a potential threat to the colony to have these well-educated people in New Amsterdam. So he didn't want to give them several fundamental rights. For instance, the right to travel to other colonies, the right to trade. Jews didn't have, and this is so basic, Jewish burial. So there were no Jewish cemeteries. There was, of course, no kosher meals,
Right.
no places of worship, and Jews were not allowed to practice their religion in freedom.
Okay, we're going to take a short break right
Yeah,
now,
so
but when we come back, we're going to talk more about the settlement and the challenges that those Jews of New Amsterdam faced. We'll be right back. We're back with author Ann Wainer. Ann, again, thank you very much for joining us on To Life L'Chaim. We're discussing your essay on the Jewish and Brazilian connections to New York and those initial 23 Jews who arrived in the new land in New Amsterdam, which is now New York. Talk to us a little bit more about the struggles that they faced and how they overcame those challenges.
Well, as I was mentioning, there were no kosher meals, no synagogues, and they had to fight for every single right. They had to fight, to build places of worship, and also, a fundamental right. They had to fight to have the right to own property.
So going back to their time in Amsterdam, they were allowed to practice freely.
Yes, in Amsterdam, yes.
Right, and then what compelled them to even leave Amsterdam? If they were able to practice freely, if they were prominent citizens, what compelled them to even leave?
New opportunities in the new world, if I may be redundant. It was a new colony with welcoming
So they decided
immigrants, and actually Holland needed to populate this state, Pernambuco, and specifically Recife. They needed to occupy it with their people. So they came, and even, you know, the first rabbi, and he's considered, that's amazing, one of the first writers of America and poets, Rabbi Abuab. He came from Amsterdam. He was the first rabbi in the synagogue Al Sur Israel in Recife. But then, you know, when the Portuguese reconquered Pernambuco, he went back and he built the extraordinary, the beautiful, is standing there, great synagogue of Amsterdam. But this is what they wanted, you know.
So this began with the ideas of expanding commerce.
Exactly.
From the Dutch East India Company, they came down to Portugal and Brazil, and they were persecuted there. The persecution started.
Yes,
there.
That's it. All started in the end, exactly in the end of the 15th century, with the Inquisition.
Right.
So in Brazil, when Brazil was, because you know, not many people know, but Brazil was discovered just 8 years after U.S. Brazil was discovered in the 1500s, but the Portuguese didn't tolerate the practice of the Jewish religion, not only in Portugal, but also in the colonies. So when the Dutch occupied Pernambuco, Recife, it was really an opportunity to expand its territory, and people were needed. So all these people were coming, rabbis, merchants, engineers, to build a new land. So not many people know, but Brazil is considered, and I am very proud of that. Brazil is considered to be the mother of American Jewry. Isn't that fantastic? Yes, many historians differ a little bit on the details of the, you know, of the exodus from Brazil and arrival in New Amsterdam, but no one really discusses that Brazil is really Brazil, my dear homeland, is the mother of American Jewish history.
Very good.
Celebrating now in September 360 years of Jewish life in America.
So those 23 Jews decided to leave and come to New Amsterdam and face this persecution that and the challenges that they faced. So talk to us through how they were able to rise out of that.
Yeah, well, when they came to New Amsterdam, they faced all these obstacles, not only with Peter Stuyvesant, but also the sheriff and the Dutch reverend of the Reformed Church. But they were lobbying all the time with their brothers and sisters from the Dutch West India Company, who continued in Amsterdam to persuade, you know, Stuyvesant and the sheriff and the reverend to allow them to stay and to, you know, to amplify the rights that these Jews needed to have in order to become fully citizens of the colony. So each time Stuyvesant would deny them a right and even an obligation, because, for instance, Asher Levy, which is also a very known person in American history and one of the most prominent Jews at the time, he was always petitioning to the in the Dutch courts in order to obtain legal rights and also legal obligations, even the obligation to stand guard as any other of his of the other citizens in the colony of New Amsterdam.
Is there a historical perspective to Stuyvesant's bigotry, or was it just because the Jews were different?
No, it was not only, that's a very good question. No, it was not only to the Jews, toward the Jews. He was afraid, and I think this is really the first time in America that we see, you know, they were struggling between state and religion to be two different powers. At that time, everything was together. So, you know, coming those 23, and later on, of course, many others, to New Amsterdam at the time, that was really a potential threat to to the governor.
Very good. Tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to know more, because your writing is different in terms of the historical perspective that you present. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more?
If they want to find out more, it would be a pleasure to receive, the feedbacks and, even invitations to speak about the book, which I have been having many because of the interest, and people are very surprised about this connection of Brazil and U.S. and this relation. So it can be through the email jewishbrazilianconnection@gmail.com. So this is the email of the book. Again, jewishbrazilianconnection@gmail.com.
Very good. Ann Wainer, thank you very much for joining us on To Life L'Chaim.
Thank you very much, Lee, for having me again. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you.